The alien whispered, "Take it off. What happened next will shock you." The planet was silent, its barren surface stretching out like an endless wasteland. The wind howled softly, but there were no trees to sway or rocks to move. It was as if the planet itself held its breath, waiting for something to happen. The stars above twinkled faintly, their light dimmed by the thick atmosphere. Character's name stood at the edge of the ship's ramp, his boots sinking into the dry soil as he surveyed the landscape. He had come here on a mission, one that seemed like any other. But the coordinates had led him to this uncharted world, a place no one had dared to explore for centuries. Something about it felt wrong. The mission was simple: investigate the strange readings coming from deep within the planet's core. No one had heard from the last crew that landed here, and now it was up to him to find out why. But as he gazed across the wasteland, he couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't alone. The air seemed to hum with a strange energy, as if the planet itself was alive, watching him. With a deep breath, Character's name adjusted the strap of his pack and began walking toward the direction indicated by his scanner. The ground was rough beneath his feet, and the shadows cast by the distant mountains seemed to grow longer with each step. The silence was unnerving, broken only by the soft crunch of his boots on the dry soil. He wasn't sure what he expected to find. Perhaps an abandoned facility long forgotten, or maybe an ancient alien relic buried beneath the surface. But what he didn't expect was the sudden sound of movement from the shadows. It was subtle at first, like a whisper of wind, but it didn't come from the air. It came from the ground, from somewhere deep beneath the earth. Character's name stopped in his tracks, his heart pounding. He reached for his weapon, but before his fingers could touch the cool metal of his sidearm, a figure appeared from the darkness. The alien was tall, its form partially cloaked in shadows. The skin was a deep shade of violet, almost iridescent, and its eyes glowed a faint gold like twin stars in the dark. Its features were sharp, angular, and unmistakably alien. It moved with an eerie grace, as though it wasn't quite walking on the ground but gliding just above it. For a moment, they just stared at each other, the air thick with tension. Character's name didn't know whether to speak or run. The alien didn't seem to have any intentions of attacking. It simply watched him with those glowing eyes, as if waiting for him to make the first move. Then, without warning, it spoke. The voice was low, almost melodic, but there was something unsettling about it. It wasn't a language he recognized, but the words felt like they were being drilled directly into his mind. It wasn't just speech, it was a command. The alien's lips barely moved as it spoke, yet the sound seemed to come from everywhere around him, surrounding him, filling his head. "Take it off." The words echoed in his mind, and for a moment, Character's name felt a strange compulsion. He couldn't explain it, but it was as if the alien's voice had woven its way into his very thoughts, forcing him to listen, to obey. "Take it off?" he muttered, confusion filling his voice. "What do you mean?" The alien tilted its head, the golden eyes never leaving him. Its expression was unreadable, but there was a certain intensity in the air now. Something charged, as if every second that passed made the situation even more dangerous. Yet the alien didn't move closer. It remained still, waiting for his next action. Character's name hesitated, his fingers brushing against the straps of his equipment. The alien hadn't attacked him. In fact, it hadn't even made any threatening gestures. But the voice, it was inside his head, urging him, pushing him. He couldn't understand why he felt the need to comply. It made no sense. But somehow the alien's presence felt overpowering, as though it was in control of the situation, and he was simply a pawn. His hand moved without thinking, unstrapping his pack and pulling it off his shoulders. The motion felt unnatural, as though his own body wasn't quite his own anymore. The air around him seemed to thicken, and the temperature dropped ever so slightly. It was a feeling he couldn't shake, like something was shifting in the atmosphere, something unseen and powerful. "Why am I doing this?" Character's name whispered to himself, his voice trembling. He looked back at the alien, but it remained silent, its eyes still glowing faintly in the dark. The creature stepped forward, its movements slow and deliberate, but there was no aggression in its approach. It was simply watching and waiting. Character's name stood frozen in place, his thoughts racing. The alien's presence was overwhelming, and for a moment he wondered if he was dreaming. Was this real? Was he losing his mind? Then, before he could react, the alien raised a hand and the ground beneath him trembled. A low hum filled the air, vibrating in his chest, and suddenly everything felt different. As though the planet itself was alive, resonating with some unknown energy. It was as if the very atmosphere was reacting to the alien's power. In that moment, character's name realized that nothing on this planet was as it seemed. And whatever was happening now was only the beginning. The silence was almost deafening as character's name stood motionless, the weight of the alien's gaze pressing down on him. His hand still clutched his pack, now hanging uselessly at his side. The strange alien voice continued to echo in his mind, but the command was clear. He had to trust her. But trust wasn't something he could give easily. Not after everything he had seen in his life. The unknown, especially this alien, felt more like a threat than a guide. But something about the alien's stillness made him pause. She had not attacked him. She had not made any sudden movements. She had only spoken. And her words, there was something inexplicably powerful about them. The alien's golden eyes shimmered as she watched him, seemingly waiting for his next move. The weight of her stare was suffocating, making it difficult for him to think straight. The tension in the air grew thick, and the temperature seemed to drop even further. The ground beneath him was no longer solid. He could feel the subtle tremor of the planet's pulse beneath his feet. It was as if the very earth was alive, responding to something, responding to her. Character's name felt a strange pull to obey. It was as if a force beyond his control was guiding his every action, and no matter how hard he tried to resist, he couldn't. His hands, trembling, slowly unbuckled the rest of his gear. One by one, the straps came undone, and the layers of protective clothing fell away, exposing more of him to the alien's scrutiny. The moment his outer layers hit the ground, the alien stepped forward. Her movement was unnerving, gliding effortlessly across the ground as if gravity had no hold on her. There was no sound, no shift in the air, only the quiet, unnerving presence of the alien. She stopped in front of him, her body towering over him, yet there was no aggression, no malice in her stance. She simply watched him. Character's name swallowed hard. His heart was pounding in his chest, and he could feel the sweat beginning to beat along his brow. Despite the cold of the planet, a strange warmth was beginning to emanate from the alien, radiating outward, slowly engulfing him. Her eyes, burning gold, focused on his every movement. He took a step back, but it felt as if the ground was pulling him forward. The alien's presence was magnetic, drawing him closer despite his best efforts to retreat. And then, without warning, she reached out and placed a single long finger under his chin. The touch was light, almost delicate, but it sent an electric shock of heat through his entire body. His breath caught in his throat as her finger brushed against his skin. A sensation, unlike anything he had ever felt before, flooded his senses. His heart raced. It was as if the entire universe had collapsed into this one singular moment. The two of them standing face to face in the cold silence of the unknown planet. "Who are you?" Character's name finally managed to ask, his voice barely more than a whisper. The question hung in the air, thick with the confusion that twisted in his chest. The alien's lips parted, but no sound emerged. Instead, her eyes flashed with a strange, knowing glint. And then, suddenly his surroundings began to shift. The ground beneath him trembled again, only this time the tremor wasn't from the planet. It was something else. He could feel the air growing heavier, the pressure around him increasing, as if something was being pulled from deep within the planet itself. A deep hum filled the air, and before he could react, the space around him distorted. It was as though time itself was bending, warping. The world around him shimmered, the landscape beginning to blur and twist. It was no longer just him and the alien standing on a barren planet. He saw flashes, quick, fleeting images, strange, alien cities bathed in eerie light, advanced technology beyond anything humanity had ever dreamed of, and countless beings whose forms were both beautiful and terrifying. For a moment, Character's name thought he might be losing his mind, but then just as quickly as the vision began, it stopped. He was back on the planet, the alien still standing in front of him, her gaze fixed upon him with an intensity that left him breathless. "Why? Why did you show me that?" he gasped, his voice trembling. The alien didn't speak, but she gestured toward the horizon with one long, elegant arm. The gesture was not a command, but an invitation. His eyes followed her movement, and for the first time he noticed something he hadn't seen before. A vast, hidden structure in the distance, half buried beneath the soil. It was enormous, ancient, and unmistakably alien in design. The alien stepped back, her golden eyes never leaving him. "That is where your journey begins," she said, her voice now clear and direct. The words echoed in his mind, and he felt a deep unease settle over him. Her tone had changed, no longer cryptic, but somehow more personal, more intimate. Character's name stared at the structure. The vision had been a warning, or perhaps a guide. But what exactly was he meant to do? What role did he play in this alien world? Was he simply a witness, or was there something more? He took a hesitant step forward, drawn to the structure as if the planet itself was pulling him in. He couldn't ignore the feeling that this was not just some random mission. This was something much larger, something that transcended his understanding. His hand trembled as he reached for his weapon, but when his fingers brushed against the sidearm, it felt insignificant. The alien had already stripped him of his protection, and now it seemed like nothing more than a relic of a forgotten life. The air around him pulsed again, but this time, it wasn't just the planet reacting. It was the alien herself, her power, her presence, vibrating in sync with everything around them. And with that, character's name made his decision. He couldn't turn back now. The structure, the alien, the visions, they had all led him here. He was part of something much bigger than he could comprehend. But what that was, he had yet to discover. The distance between character's name and the alien structure seemed to stretch on endlessly, each step carrying more weight than the last. The ground felt colder now, the soil harder under his boots, as if the very planet was resisting his approach. His mind raced with questions that had no answers, but his feet kept moving, as if something else was guiding him, something far stronger than his own will. Behind him, the alien followed silently, her presence a constant pressure on his thoughts. He could feel her gaze on him, watching, waiting. Yet she remained distant, offering no further words. Just the occasional flicker of those glowing golden eyes that seemed to pierce through him with an unsettling clarity. As they drew closer to the structure, its true scale became apparent. What had once seemed like a mere outpost or ruin was now unmistakably a colossal structure, ancient, but somehow undisturbed by time. The walls were etched with intricate carvings, and faint symbols pulsed along the surface as if the structure itself was alive, breathing in rhythm with the planet. When they finally arrived at the entrance, character's name was struck by the overwhelming silence. It was not the quiet of a dead world, but the kind of silence that felt pregnant with meaning, something waiting to be discovered. The massive door stood before him, seemingly made of some dark metallic material that shimmered faintly in the weak light. He paused, looking back at the alien. She was now standing just a few steps behind him, her eyes fixed on the door, as if she knew exactly what was about to unfold. For a moment, character's name considered turning back, abandoning the mission, but the pull was undeniable. The curiosity gnawing at him was stronger than any sense of fear. Taking a deep breath, he stepped forward and reached for the door. To his surprise, the door didn't open with the touch of his hand. Instead, it seemed to respond to something else, something more ancient than his presence. The air around them hummed with a low vibrating sound, and the carvings on the door began to glow brighter, pulsating in time with the beating of his heart. And then, the voice returned. It was soft at first, like a whisper that brushed against the back of his mind. But it was the same voice, the alien's voice, now more insistent. "Step inside." The command resonated through him deep into his bones. He felt the compulsion to obey, but part of him, something deeply human, fought against it. Still, his body moved forward, the door parting with a low groan of metal, revealing a cavernous hall beyond. The air was thick with the scent of aged stone and something metallic, and the walls were lined with more of the glowing symbols that seemed to dance in the darkness. As he stepped into the chamber, the door closed behind him with a final echoing thud. He was no longer on the surface of the planet, standing before an alien ruin. No, this place felt different. The atmosphere was charged with an unnatural energy, and the walls around him pulsed as if they were alive. The alien followed, her presence as constant as ever. But now, for the first time, she spoke again. "You have come to learn the truth," she said, her voice clear and steady, though it still carried that strange, unsettling resonance. "But you may not be prepared for what you will discover." The words hung in the air, and for a moment, character's name was unsure how to respond. He didn't understand what she meant. He was here to investigate, to uncover the fate of the previous crew. But now it felt as though he was standing on the precipice of something far more significant, something that transcended his mission. Before he could ask any questions, the alien moved ahead, her hand rising in a graceful motion. The symbols on the walls flared brighter, and suddenly, the room around them shifted. The air grew heavy, and the chamber itself seemed to twist as though bending space and time. A hologram flickered to life before him, a vast, sprawling image of a civilization unlike anything he had ever seen. The figures were alien, their bodies long and sleek, their faces hidden behind ornate helmets. But there was one face that stood out, a figure that towered above the others. Radiating power and wisdom, the alien spoke again, her voice now tinged with something that almost resembled sorrow. Thousands of years ago, my people ruled this galaxy. We were masters of technology, of space, of life itself. But we were also arrogant, and in our arrogance we destroyed ourselves. The hologram shifted, showing scenes of war, of powerful fleets clashing in space, of entire planets reduced to nothing more than ashes. The destruction was catastrophic, and the alien's voice grew even quieter as the scene continued. We sought immortality, and in our desperation, we created a power we could not control. The consequences were disastrous. Character's name watched in stunned silence as the hologram displayed the fall of this once great civilization. The alien race, so advanced, had brought about their own downfall, and in doing so, they had sealed their fate, leaving behind nothing but ruins and forgotten technology. As the hologram faded, the alien turned to face him, her eyes full of a deep, unspoken sadness. "I was the last of my kind," she whispered. "The last to carry the knowledge, the last to remember. And now you are the last hope for my people." The weight of her words settled heavily on his chest. What had started as a routine mission had now become something much, much bigger. He wasn't just here to investigate. He was standing in the heart of a tragedy, the final echo of a civilization that had long since fallen. The alien's voice cut through his thoughts. "You must decide now, human. Will you help me restore what was lost, or will you walk away, leaving us to fade into nothingness?" Character's name stared at her, the weight of her plea crashing over him. His mission had just become something much greater than he could have ever imagined. He had only one choice. The alien's words hung in the air, heavy and haunting. Every part of character's names being screamed at him to run, to leave, to break free from this strange, magnetic force that had ensnared him. But the power of the alien's plea was undeniable. He had come here seeking answers, and now he stood on the precipice of a choice that could change everything. Will you help me restore what was lost, or will you walk away, leaving us to fade into nothingness? The alien's voice echoed through his thoughts, laced with desperation, but also something far darker, something that began to gnaw at his insides. The weight of the decision pressed down on him. To help her, to restore the alien race, meant embracing something far beyond his understanding. It meant trusting her. But trust was a fragile thing, and the more he thought about it, the more he realized that he had seen nothing but shadows and half-truths since he set foot on this forsaken planet. As he stood there, struggling with his decision, a sudden tremor shook the ground beneath him. The room, once silent, seemed to come alive, the walls humming with an unfamiliar energy. The symbols that adorned the stone glowed brighter, pulsating with a rhythm that felt almost alive, like a heartbeat. The alien stepped closer, her golden eyes unwavering. But this time, there was something different in her gaze, something colder, more calculating. "You think you understand, don't you?" she asked, her voice softer now, almost seductive. "You think you can save me, that you can restore my people. But you're wrong." Character's name blinked in confusion. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice tinged with both frustration and fear. "You told me I was the last hope. I'm the one who can help you." The alien smiled, a small, almost sadistic twist of her lips. "I never said you were the only hope," she replied cryptically. "In fact, you're not even the one I need." A cold chill ran down character's name's spine as her words hit him. He stepped back, instinctively reaching for his weapon. His fingers brushed against the cold metal, but it felt heavier than it should have, as if it no longer belonged to him. The air around him crackled, the atmosphere shifting from one of anticipation to one of dread. You used me," he whispered, the realization slowly sinking in. All along you used me. The alien's expression hardened. I did not use you, she corrected, her voice cold and devoid of emotion. You were necessary, a catalyst for what was always meant to happen. Everything clicked into place for character's name. The strange compulsion he had felt, the way his every action had been guided. He hadn't been in control at all. He had been a pawn in a much larger game, one he had never fully understood. The weight of the betrayal crushed him, but there was no time to process it. The alien's plan was already set in motion. You think you have a choice, human, she continued, but you never did. You are part of a grand design. This is the way it was always meant to be. The walls seemed to close in around him, the flickering lights now casting long, sinister shadows that stretched across the stone floor. He felt the air grow thick, charged with an unnatural force. It was no longer just the alien manipulating him. It was the very planet itself, reacting to her words, reacting to the power she had awakened. A sudden flash of light filled the room, blinding him for a moment. When his vision cleared, he was no longer standing in the chamber with the alien. Instead, he found himself standing on a platform high above a vast, swirling void. The sky around him was a deep violet hue, and the stars were obscured by a thick mist that seemed to pulse with life. Beneath his feet, the platform seemed to vibrate with an ancient, malevolent energy, and there, standing before him, was the alien. Only now, she was not alone. Behind her stood a towering figure, one that radiated power and authority. It was the same figure he had seen in the hologram, the one who had led the fallen civilization. The alien turned to face him, her golden eyes gleaming with a strange, almost triumphant glint. Do you see now? She asked, her voice dripping with bitterness. This was never about saving my people. This was about me. The truth hit him like a slap. The alien wasn't seeking redemption for her race. She wasn't trying to restore a fallen civilization. She was trying to resurrect the power of her bloodline, of her own legacy, and she had used him, his human innocence, his ignorance of her true intentions, as a means to an end. You were a tool, she said, her words cutting through him like a blade. A means to my end. And now that I have what I need, you no longer matter. Before he could react, the ground beneath him gave way. The platform crumbled and he was falling into the swirling void below. The wind howled around him, his body weightless as he plummeted toward the unknown. Panic gripped him as the void stretched on endlessly. He tried to reach for something, anything, to stop his descent, but there was nothing, only darkness. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, the fall stopped. His feet slammed into solid ground, the impact knocking the breath from his lungs. Dazed, he looked around, his eyes adjusting to the dim light. He was no longer on the alien planet, no longer in the chamber with the alien. He was somewhere else entirely, somewhere far deeper than he had ever imagined. The alien's voice echoed in his mind. Colder now. Final. You've seen the truth, human. You're no longer needed. Stood motionless, his feet sinking into the dark, unfamiliar ground. The world around him felt wrong, alien in every sense. The air was thick with a strange metallic scent, and the faint glow from the shifting clouds overhead cast an eerie light across the barren landscape. It was a place that defied explanation, distant like a dream, yet all too real. His mind raced. The alien's betrayal had shattered his understanding of everything he thought he knew about this mission. The truth was now clear. He had been nothing more than a pawn in a game far larger and darker than he had ever imagined. The alien's plan, her true intentions, were laid bare, and the weight of that knowledge crushed him. His heart pounded in his chest, each beat a reminder of the danger he now faced. There was no turning back now. The alien had orchestrated every step, manipulated his every move. She had used him, and now she expected him to simply accept his fate. But character's name was not a man to submit easily. His mind churned with thoughts of how to escape, how to stop the alien and her twisted plans. Yet, as he tried to formulate a plan, he realized with a sickening certainty that he had no idea where to even begin. The sound of footsteps behind him broke through the silence. The alien. She was there, standing in the shadows, watching him. Her golden eyes gleamed in the darkness. Her form now a towering figure in the distance. She had been waiting for this moment, for him to realize the full extent of his role. You are not the first, she said, her voice cold, distant. There were others before you. Others who thought they could stop me, who thought they could resist. They failed. Just as you will. Character's name turned slowly, his hands clenching into fists at his sides. You think you've won? He spat, his voice full of defiance. You think you can control everything? You can't. There's still a chance to stop this. The alien smiled, a slow, knowing smile that sent a chill down his spine. You misunderstand. There was never a chance. You were never meant to stop anything. You were simply a step in the process, a catalyst. Nothing more. Her words struck him like a blow, each syllable chipping away at his resolve. He had thought he could change something, fix this twisted situation. But the alien's words twisted that hope into something dark and suffocating. The realization hit him like a freight train. He was just one small piece in a game far beyond his control. His choices, his actions, had all been predetermined from the very beginning. Why? Character's name demanded, his voice shaking with a mix of anger and disbelief. Why use me? Why make me believe I had a choice? The alien stepped closer, her figure looming over him, her presence filling the space between them. Because you needed to believe it, she replied softly. You needed to think you had control. It is only when you believe you are free that you make the choices I need you to make. He stumbled backward, his mind spinning. His every step, every decision had been manipulated. The alien had guided him here, controlled his every move. And now she stood in front of him, revealing the depth of her power. You're nothing but a puppet, character's name whispered, the truth sinking in deeper with each passing second. And I'm just another string you pulled. The alien's expression softened, almost pitying. I never meant for you to understand this. But now that you do, you have a choice. Character's name blinked, his head spinning. A choice? He repeated, his voice trembling with disbelief. After everything you've done, after everything you've taken from me, you think I still have a choice? The alien's eyes gleamed with an emotion he couldn't quite place. You always had a choice, she said softly. The choice was never about whether or not you would help me. It was about whether or not you would accept your place in this grand design. A cold wave of realization swept over him. This was it, the moment of truth. The alien was offering him a choice, her choice. She wasn't asking for help. She was giving him the power to decide how the next chapter would unfold. He had become a part of something far greater than he could comprehend. Something that had been set in motion long before he ever arrived. You're not offering me a choice, a character's name replied bitterly. You're giving me the illusion of one. There's nothing left for me here but your twisted version of reality. The alien nodded as though she had expected this reaction. You can choose to fight. You can choose to resist me if you wish. But know this, human, resistance will not save you. It will only delay the inevitable. She extended a hand toward him, her fingers glowing with an eerie, otherworldly light. The power that radiated from her was undeniable. It was the same power he had felt when they first met, an overwhelming, irresistible force that demanded obedience. She was not offering him a simple decision. She was giving him a glimpse of what it meant to stand against her. Character's name stepped back, his mind racing. He was trapped in a corner, unable to see a way out. He had come here seeking answers, but now he realized he had only uncovered the tip of an ancient, dark conspiracy. The alien was no savior. She was the architect of his destruction. The choice loomed before him. Fight and die, or accept her twisted offer and become another tool in her game. The alien's smile widened, and for the first time he saw something in her eyes that sent a wave of terror through him. It wasn't just coldness. It was confidence. She had already won, and he had no idea how. You have one final choice, she said, her voice barely a whisper. Will you join me? Or will you watch everything burn? Character's name took a deep breath, his heart pounding in his chest. His mind was clouded with doubt, fear, and anger. But through it all, one thought stood out. There was still one thing he could control, his next move. And as he met her gaze, he made his decision.